What's up guys, Readiness Reviews back with you again. In this video, we're going to do a rundown of all the awesome military surplus firearms in the first 3 Indiana Jones movies. As we all know, the last installment of the Indiana Jones franchise just came out, and in preparation of viewing The Dial of Destiny, I went back and revisited the original Indiana Jones trilogy, a movie trilogy that I have seen many times and was a gigantic part of my childhood. As it turns out, the Indiana Jones series is completely cram-packed with really cool military surplus firearms, and so that rewatch inspired me to make this video today. Before we get into it, remember to give the video a thumbs up if you like seeing videos of this nature here on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of my future content, and let me know down in the comments if you like seeing these movie gun videos. So we'll start things out here with Raiders of the Lost Ark and our very first firearm, Indy's very own M1917 Smith & Wesson revolver. We get the first glimpse at it here in his holster. This revolver is chambered in .45 ACP. These handguns were used by the United States in the First World War. The way to distinguish a Smith & Wesson from a Colt 1917 with just a glance is the ejector rod. The Colt's ejector rod is far more standalone than the Smith is. There are actually 2 main revolvers used in Raiders of the Lost Ark. There was also a Smith & Wesson Mark II hand ejector used. Now, I'm not well versed enough with revolvers to tell the difference between the two, but apparently the M1917 was used in their US shooting, and in their overseas filming they used that Mark II hand ejector. And this is an excellent shot of his iconic revolver. Both of the revolvers used in filming do have a shortened 4-inch barrel, and I just really love this image of his packed bag, all the essentials, whip, gun, and coat. This is another super iconic image from the series starring Indy Smith & Wesson revolver. And here's a beautiful in-action shot. In this one, we can very clearly make out the little lanyard loop on the bottom of the grip. Looking straight down that .45 caliber barrel here. I love this shot. In this image, Indy's actually putting his revolver away to bring out the next gun we're going to be talking about, and that is the Browning High Power. The Browning High Power is, of course, chambered in 9mm with a very substantial round count for the time of 13. This was a little blurry, but we can see the muzzle end. In this one, we have a bit of a struggle going on, but that high power is a little bit more clear. We also have those shadows in the background with more interesting Milsurp firearms. I know if I was in Indy's shoes, I would much rather have that high power than the revolver, strictly from the rounds count alone. The C96 Mauser, also known as the Mauser broom handle, has a couple really good shots in the film. I really like this particular side profile. In this image, we have one of our very first looks at this movie's main submachine gun. This is a German MP40. This is also one of the biggest flaws of this movie. Raiders of the Lost Ark takes place in 1936. Well, as the model name would suggest, the MP40 came out in 1940. The MP40 is very heavily featured in this movie, but technically if it was actually 1936, this firearm would not exist yet. Here's a good shot of the muzzle end. This is a pretty cool loading shot of that MP40. You can see just a little bit of shiny brass from that 9mm cartridge. This is the MP40 on the streets of what I would assume is Cairo, kicking up some dust, and then you have this gentleman looking very menacing with his MP40 at the ready. So they got the dating wrong on the MP40. It's not the only mistake in Raiders of the Lost Ark though, and that'll take us over to the P38. So here's an image of one of our villains brandishing a P38. Now the P38 was probably in development at this point, but I don't think it would have been in many people's hands, given that it was adopted in 1938 and this is 1936. I actually had to look very closely to know for sure that this was a P38, but after going frame by frame, I came to the conclusion that it most definitely is. Here's a side profile, and here's an even better side profile. For comparison, I have my P38 right here, and we can tell 100% that these are indeed the same firearm. The P38 is a great gun, but it did not exist in 1936. The back of this truck is filled with the things dreams are made of. It is stocked to the roof with all sorts of munitions, and we have some cool Milsurps mixed in. So we have a pile of Mausers there. It's difficult to tell exactly what Mausers these are, given their length and what appears to be straight bolt handle. I'm going to say those are most likely Gewehr 98 Mausers. You can also see an H-band near the muzzle, which a Gewehr 98 would have. And we can also see a pile of MP40 submachine guns and all kinds of ammo. Very sadly, this truck does go boom shortly thereafter. And here's an image of its cremation. This is a shot of the movie that I absolutely love. It's a great image of Indy with his hand at the ready, and then we have some henchmen with MP40s and Mausers. Again, most likely Gewehr 98 Mausers. Now in this image we have some German soldiers. They're sitting down and eating, and they have their Mausers next to them. Now I believe these Mausers are probably Kar 98Ks because they do seem pretty short in comparison to how tall these soldiers are sitting down eating. In the back of the image here, we do have a fella smoking with his Mauser, chatting with his buddy with his MP40. And this next one about does it for Raiders of the Lost Ark. This is an MG34 with a drum magazine, a vehicle-mounted one at that. Raiders of the Lost Ark has great action scenes with these firearms, even if they don't exactly fit the time frame of the movie. Now we're going to take it right on over to our second Indiana Jones movie. Temple of Doom is actually a prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark, even though it was released as a sequel. Temple of Doom does not have nearly as much gunplay as our other two original Indiana Jones films, but it does have its fair share of cool guns to take a look at. Indy has changed his revolver. Now I know this is very blurry and hard to see. Maybe it's a little bit more clear in this one. I wasn't able to tell what this revolver is just by going frame by frame in the movie. So I did a little bit of internet searching, and the consensus is that this revolver is actually a Colt police revolver. Next up here we have an image of a revolver that I could not identify. It is some sort of chromed or nickeled top break revolver, most likely chambered in 32 Smith & Wesson or possibly 38 Smith & Wesson. If you know what kind of revolver that is, let me know down in the comments. And we have another revolver here. Again, this one is very hard to tell exactly what it is, especially because we cannot see the ejector side. But just from the silhouette here, I'm going to wager to guess that this is probably a Smith & Wesson revolver. And unfortunately, that's about the best I can do. I'm no revolver expert. Temple of Doom debuts an awesome action sequence with the super famous Thompson machine gun, also known as the Tommy gun, especially when it has a drum magazine like this one does. I love the scene in the movie because this guy looks like he's having a ball shooting this firearm. He's making a face very similar to what I think mine would probably look like if I had the opportunity. Just check out that pure joy on his face. Here's a side profile shot, and we have Indy in the background very narrowly evading those 45 caliber bullets. And here's another shot of a Thompson picking its muzzle out of a broken window. The beginning of Temple of Doom has guns, and the end of Temple of Doom has guns. But the middle of the movie is basically firearms free. The next gun we're taking a look at here is one that I've actually been wanting to add to my Milsurp collection, and that is a Martini Henry. We have a bad guy here running with his martini. In this image, we can spot a pretty good side profile of our old school ex-British Empire Martini Henry. The Temple of Doom does take place in India, and so I suppose that there would be a good amount of martinis in that part of the world during this time frame. Here's a guy getting ready to take a shot with his martini, and the fellow behind him has some kind of revolver that I can't quite make out. The brass-like banding on the martinis in this movie are very interesting because I've seen that kind of thing coming from Middle Eastern countries especially. In this image, we can really tell how shiny those bands are. Your typical martini does not have those shiny bands on it. And then last, we'll take it over to one of the best Milsurp scenes in any movie, period. And that is our infield shooting. We have a couple soldiers here with some Lee Enfield rifles. Now, as I stated before, this movie takes place prior to Raiders of the Lost Ark, meaning that it is pre-1936. Lee Enfields were in use in 1936, but not these particular Lee Enfields. These are number 4 Lee Enfields. The number 4 Lee Enfield was adopted in 1941. Number 4 rifles were not a thing at the time this movie takes place. If they wanted to be a little bit more correct, what they should have used is a number 1 Enfield like this one. Of course, our front end looks a little different than the number 4 does. The number 1 does not have any exposed barrel portion, and our area around the clip bridge here looks significantly different, although both rifles are chambered in the .303 cartridge. Even though they didn't get it 100% right, I still love this scene. These Indian soldiers really light it up with their in-ranks fire. I like how everyone is keeping the firearms on their shoulder while they're working the action, exactly how the Lee Enfield rifle was designed to be used. Now it's time for what is my favorite Indiana Jones movie. Raiders of the Lost Ark might be the best film, but my favorite movie of the Indiana Jones franchise has always been and will always be The Last Crusade. In this movie, Indy has once again changed up his handgun. He sure likes his revolvers though. His new revolver here is a Webley Army model. This gives us a very clear image of the right side of the handgun. I would love to add one of these Webleys to my collection. They're super cool guns. Here's a fantastic shot of that Webley top break action. When you break open one of these handguns, it automatically ejects any spent cartridges. We had a C96 in Raiders of the Lost Ark. We also have a C96 broom handle early on in The Last Crusade. One of our main villains in this movie carries a Luger as his sidearm. A Luger is literally my holy grail of military pistols. I want one so bad. The next firearm is one that is very cool that they decided to add it into the movie, and that is our MP28. There were never very many of these German submachine guns made, but I suppose there would have been some in circulation in 1938, so it could make sense that this would pop up during that time. This particular MP28 encounters some kind of malfunction, and you can see it in this image here. The gun appears to kind of open up on itself while it's being fired. You can see that even better in this shot. The top of the firearm is completely separated from the stock of the firearm, minus whatever kind of mechanism holds the top and the bottom together at the front of the stock. When I was first watching through, I thought that these two guns were again MP28s, but I looked a little closer and I noticed the magazine is coming out on the right side as opposed to the left side, and there's some kind of little bolt knob or something at the back end. We can see the side of the one on the left a little better in this image. I truly have no clue what submachine gun this is, so if you know what subgun this is, let me know down in the comments. I would really like to know on this one. While we're talking about submachine guns, we once again have to talk about the MP40. Last Crusade does take place in 1938, so again, the MP40 really wouldn't have been in circulation at this point, but it makes for a fun movie gun nonetheless. In this image, we have a squad of German soldiers, all armed with their MP40s and their commanding officer with his Luger. In this movie, I think Indy got fed up being shot at by MP40s and he wanted a little bit of payback. This scene of Indy taking out some German soldiers with the MP40 is really an excellent one, and I love how shocked Sean Connery looks that his son just dusted all these guys. It seems you can't have an Indiana Jones movie without a P-38 being featured, and we have plenty in this one. Here's a couple German guys making very sour faces while holding their P-38s. This is another super iconic image from the movie of Indy using a P-38. It just so happens these three soldiers line up perfectly for him to take all three out with a single bullet. Now, I'm not sure if the 9mm cartridge is capable of that kind of penetration or not, but it makes for some fun. This is sort of a one-off pistol in the movie. I believe this to be a Walther PP, given its size. It is a lady holding it, so this could possibly be a PPK, but it's one of those two, either a Walther PP or PPK. Either way, a cool inclusion to the movie. In this image, we can see these two guards with carbine-length Mausers. So this Mauser has a straight bolt handle. It's obviously very short. And the way the end of the stock looks near the bayonet lug leads me to think that this is probably either an M93 or M95 Mauser. Since this movie takes place in the Middle East, perhaps this is an Ottoman 1893. I'm almost certain that's what kind of Mauser we're looking at in this picture. This is also a carbine-length Mauser. It is missing the cleaning rod, but that looks a lot like an 1893 model Mauser to me. If not 1893, it is an 1895 Mauser. Those are essentially the same pattern gun. And here's another shot of it, and you can really tell that straight bolt handle. This is another Mauser that's a little bit of a mystery. It appears to have an H-band, a straight bolt handle, and it has finger grooves. It also looks to be an intermediate length. So I'm thinking this is either a VZ-24 or possibly a Spanish 1943 Mauser. Here we have a couple German soldiers running with their Mausers, and you would figure that these would be Kar 98K Mausers. But in this shot, we can get a good look at the H-band and bayonet lug, and that certainly doesn't look like a Kar 98 bayonet lug to me. The plot thickens with this next image. This is the same Mauser, and it has a straight bolt handle. So that tells me 100% we're not looking at a Kar 98. This is something else. With the observation of the bayonet lug and the straight bolt handle, I'm almost certain that the rifle that we're seeing in this image is a Spanish M1943 rifle. This protruding bayonet lug was added on so the Spanish could continue using their older model of bayonet. And the bayonet lug in the movie seems a lot like that one. That straight bolt handle is also a feature that is very clear. And if we go back a couple slides to this rifle, you can definitely tell those finger grooves are there. So I think that's what we're looking at, a Spanish Mauser in this movie. This is just a really cool shot. It is packed full of all kinds of cool guns. We have what looks like some more of our 1893 Mauser carbines. Again, those could be 1895s. And behind those, we have some old school muskets. Probably British manufacturer, but I'm no expert. We've had lots of Mausers in this movie already, but there are a few Kar 98K Mausers on display, and this is probably my favorite image of the entire movie, showing off those Kar 98Ks. These Mausers very clearly have a bent bolt handle. They have a World War II era H-band. They're an intermediate length. And John Rhys Davies looks very surprised to have them pointed at his chest. In the background, we can see Indy being held up with a P-38, and we'll wrap things up with a gun that was made famous by James Bond, the Walther PPK. Our bad guy looks like he's going to fire from the waist here, and we can get a shot of the other side of the handgun in this image being pointed at Sean Connery. Ironically, the same James Bond that made the PPK so famous. And one more nice shot here of the Walther PPK. The PPK is, of course, just a smaller version of the Walther PP. I truly love these movies. Like I said before, they were such a huge part of my childhood. I grew up on them, watching them with my dad, and I'm sure all the cool gunplay in these movies is one of the things that led to my interest in Milsurps in the first place. So it was really cool to get to go through them so meticulously and pick out all those Milsurp firearms and share them with you guys. If you would like to see another video on the Crystal Skull and the Dial of Destiny, for sure let me know down in the comments, because that is something I would like to do if you guys want to see it. I want to say a big thank you to you guys for checking it out. If you know someone else that might enjoy this video, please be sure to share it, because that helps the channel grow more than anything else. Thumbs up the video to help it out with the Google algorithm, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to catch all of my future videos on Milsurp Firearms and occasionally movie Milsurp Firearms. I will catch you guys in the next video. See you then. Peace.